those different resources, those different programs, the person that's looking for help and the person that wants to give help together. And sometimes that can be a little bit nebulous, but we do that in a number of ways. So the first one is the community grants. That's probably what you're most familiar with. That's the traditional United Way model that has existed across the country for about 150 years. That is where we raise money in the community, primarily through workplaces, and then we use that for grants to different organizations. We have a number of organizations in Vermillion that do community grants. What probably sets United Way apart a little bit is that we really fund programming, and we do it long-term, year after year. So oftentimes, if you put a project for Dakota Hospital Foundation or Community Foundation, you might not get one the next time, and it might be for a specific project, which is awesome because we don't do that. What we do is, for example, American Red Cross and the way that they respond to fires in our community, we've been funding that for 65 years straight. 65 years, they have come to United Way to make sure that when they respond to a fire, they've got funding covered for Clay County fires. We've done that for 65 years. And we've got a lot of programs that we have funded for at least half a century. And that doesn't mean we're not open to new things. We add new programs every year, but that's kind of what's different about that model, right? We focus on health, education, financial stability. Those are kind of our three pillars that we look at. And we only focus on human services, which I know Chuck has come to me about before. We don't work with animals. That's the one caveat we have. But we've got great programs in our community that do work with animals, so we feel like that's pretty well covered. So in 2023, we've got 29 different programs that we are going to be funding. That's really everything from, early childhood through the Vikurovich Center and Center for Children and Families, all the way up to our Main Street Center and Meals on Wheels, and pretty much everything in between. I kind of looked back through our previous campaigns, and in the last 65 years, actually 66 now, we've raised over $2 million in the community and given it away. We've got a great board that you'll see listed in the brochure. I see many former board members in this room today who have given a lot of time and energy. And they really do a great job looking at the needs of the community, spending a lot of time digging through those applications and making sure that the funds that we raise are used in the most responsible way possible. They also cover our 1% dues that go to United Way Worldwide for use of the logo and some of the other resources that they provide, so that when you donate, 100% of that stays local. It does not go to the national organization at all. Another big thing that we do that has grown a lot over the last few years are these internal programs and initiatives, and we call that community impact. So those would be things like the Imagination Library, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. That is a program that provides free books for kids 0 to 5 in our community. It is open to any child, and it's got great results. They've studied the way that children that have access to Imagination Library are better prepared for kindergarten than those who aren't. They've done studies in a number of communities, so we know that this is not just a nice thing to have, but a really high impact program. And it's a lot of fun. Obviously, giving books to kids is great. It was founded by Dolly Parton, so it gives me an excuse to collect a lot of Dolly memorabilia and say that it's my job. And so if you've ever seen me trekking around Vermillion with my full-size, and it really is full-size, cutout of Dolly Parton, that's why. I'm not just a weirdo. We actually took her to a conference in May. She was invited. They wanted us to bring her, and it was fun. We would come to the elevator and somebody would step on and we'd have this Dolly cut out, and people just loved it. People took lots of selfies. It was great. So the Evan Project, I know we've come to you and talked to Rotary about the Evan Project before. That's our local diaper bank that provides diapers for about 100 babies every month. In Vermillion. That's a really important service because things like WIC and SNAP do not cover diapers, and it is absolutely a necessity to keep kids healthy. It's a necessity if you want to take your kid to daycare. oftentimes you have to provide the diapers. So from a workplace or a workforce standpoint, if you can't provide diapers for your child, you can't go to work. So that's a really great program that has grown over time. One of our newest initiatives is Allen's Bed Bank. I was just talking to Ted about that. Last year, St. Agnes kind of closed up their furniture service in part because they lost their storage unit, and so we were brainstorming, what can we do? What can we do to make sure that people have furniture who need it? And Maxine Johnson ended up offering us her big shop to be able to store things in. We pulled together a furniture team that moves furniture once a month using our bus. And right now, we actually got a little overwhelmed with furniture, which is a great problem to have. So we're really focusing just on beds. You can't get a mattress at the Civic Council. You can't get a mattress at New to You. If you are in an empty apartment, you can make do with a lot of things, but you got to have a place to sleep. So we're really focusing on beds, although we have a few other items as well. And we decided that we wanted to name that in honor of Maxine's husband, Alan. So that's why it's called Allen's Bed Bank. So those are just a few of the things that we do internally that are United Way run programs. The biggest thing that we run internally, of course, is the CCC, the Community Connection Center. So the CCC has now been open for 3 years, and it's been a weird 3 years, so I'm going to use open sort of loosely. But now we are fully open, and we have had, as Katie and Josh can tell you, a really busy summer. You know, every month this summer at the food pantry, we've seen twice as many people come through as last year. So it has been, it's a really busy place. Lots of people coming and going, which makes us feel good in that we can be there for them, but always, you know, it's one of those things where we're in a business where volume doesn't always feel great, right? But it feels great to know that those people are getting the assistance that they need. I would also say that this year has really been marked by a level of interorganizational cooperation that has just been better than we had ever seen. And it's really what we had hoped, that by bringing these organizations together, we could see them collaborate, we could see them work together so that we don't use as many resources, and that we can put, you know, more volunteer and funding efforts where they need to be, and that is really happening right now, and that's been really exciting for me to watch. I think that unfortunately John Leschwa couldn't be here today, but the cooperation between, you know, his organization, which does Welcome Table and the backpack programs and teenager takeout and the food pantry, those two feeding programs has just been phenomenal. And similarly, Salvation Army, which is the emergency fund, which you're probably familiar with, that probably associate with Pat Flanagan, the way that Pat has been able to work with Josh and Rox has also been really incredible. So when somebody comes in and they've got a need, they've got people helping them from all kinds of different organizations. So the main kind of, I guess, anchor organizations that we have are the Salvation Army, the Emergency Fund. This is an outgrowth of what was the Vermillion Ministerial Association. All of those churches, you know, were trying to pool together money and really create a situation where folks in need weren't going from church to church asking for assistance, but let's put it all in one place and have a place to send people. Rox has been active in Vermillion for a long time, but we haven't had a staff person actually in Vermillion. The Yankton person traditionally would come over maybe one time a week, and then during COVID was really only available by phone. And so Josh's position, which started in July, has been the first time where we've had an outreach worker in Vermillion every day available to people. And then, of course, the food pantry and the welcome table, and then the United Way programs. So what is next? You know, our board spends a lot of time talking about what are the needs in the community, trying to forecast where we should be investing next, what's the important thing that we need to be focused on. And, you know, the CCC continues to be one of our main focuses. There's we're still fairly early on in this process, and we know that there's so much more that we can do. But there's a number of things that we're looking at trying to address at a higher level. I mentioned the bus that we use to haul furniture. That's what we're calling the CCC on the MOV, which stands for Mobile Outreach Vehicle. And that is something that we hope eventually can truly be an outreach vehicle, taking the services of the CCC out to folks that maybe can't get to us. Now, as you can imagine, outfitting a bus and figuring out how you are going to drive it, staff it, get it to where it needs to go is a big project. So right now we're kind of just like sort of using it for one-offs, but we have gotten some, I don't know, can you remember what they're called? I know. So they're the big catering, insulated catering containers that can roll on and off the bus that we can load up at the CCC and then take out. And Jim, who's our maintenance supervisor, is figuring out how those are gonna be mounted so they don't roll around. And we got a grant to be able to wrap the bus so that it can, be kind of in line with the CCC branding and stuff like that. So that is an ongoing project. Obviously, what happens in the building is always going to take priority over what happens outside. And so sometimes, especially during a summer where you're seeing double your amount of people, it takes even more of a backseat. It's still something that we're working on slowly but surely. Two really large issues that continue to hang over this community are affordable housing and mental health. And those are things that we are really interested in investing in. And the question is, what part does United Way play in that? And where can our resources be the best used? So we recently did finish a Clay County mental health assessment, like a community assessment, and trying to figure out really how do we make sure that the guests that come to our building have access to mental health services. What's that connector? Equal childhood experiences. Right now, the board is in the process of changing the way that we fund children's programs. For a number of years, we would have certain programs that would apply for grant funding, and we would fund them, $1,000 for Boy Scouts, $1,000 for Girl Scouts, this and that. And the conversation really became, what are we trying to do here? And there was always so much conversation about, does this one get more? Does this one get more? How many people are they actually serving? So a number of the other United Ways in our state have really switched to like a scholarship model that's really looks at how do we make sure that all children in our community have equal access to whatever kind of programming they want to be a part of. So if your child needs help to do baseball or Girl Scouts or band or dance, it should be about making sure that that child has the opportunity as opposed to doing a grant to the organization. So we're reformatting, and probably in 2024, you're going to see us switch completely to a Connecting Kids scholarship model. And then another big focus right now is capacity building. We are really limited because we don't have a lot of people power. I have been full-time now for 5 years, and I have one part-time person and one part-time custodian. And then we've got Katie and Josh, and then everyone else in the CCC is a volunteer. Everyone else. And so that is, a limiting factor in our ability to grow as fast as we would like to. So one of the things that we're really excited about is we just signed an MOU with AmeriCorps, and we're bringing on 2 Vistas, one that will focus only on volunteer coordination, which is a job in and of itself, and one that is going to basically aid Katie and John in the food insecurity area. And so hopefully those folks will be starting yet this year. And that's 2 full-time positions that we can add that can really work on expanding our capacity to be able to do more in those 2 areas. So how do you help? How can you be involved? Well, I know many of you help by being part of the annual campaign every year, and I appreciate that so much. If you haven't gotten something in the mail, if you are in a workplace that does a drive, you'll probably be hearing from them very soon. But you don't have to wait. You've got the brochure right there, and you can absolutely make your donation today, and then I'll check you off my list, and you won't hear from me again. That's one thing that's kind of nice about United Way. You know I'm only going to ask you once a year, and I'll leave you alone for the rest of the year. But another thing is, as Katie and I were discussing just minutes ago, we are in real need for reliable, regular volunteers. We get a lot of offers from the university to have 40 people come all at once for 2 hours, which is awesome, I guess, like if I needed my walls painted every single week. But, what we really need is that person that will show up every Thursday and be there for, the food pantry shopping, or that person that will go and get the food from that place every Monday morning, that reliable, regular volunteer. And so if that is something that you feel like you could add to your life, we're really talking about maybe 2.5 hours a week. We've switched to a model where we do require that people commit for a semester because we don't have the capacity to be constantly training new volunteers and constantly, filling in and trying to patch that together when there's so many other demands on the time. So that volunteer service is huge. Like I said, there's very few of us that are there for our job and a lot of people that are there as volunteers. So how much we rely on that and how much we appreciate the folks that do. And again, I know that there are some of you in this room that we would not be able to do what we do without your help. So that is all of my pre-planned presentation today, but I would love to answer any questions you might have. Sue.
Occurs during the weekend, what should people do?
So the police station does have Salvation Army vouchers, and so they do have the discretion if there is an emergency, like a transient person that needs to be put up in a hotel or something like that, they're able to do that over the weekend. Yep. From the food standpoint, that is something that, again, we don't have the capacity to be open over the weekends at this point. John.
I probably should know. What is the annual campaign amount we look to raise? It's around 200,000.
It's 185 is our goal this year. So this is our most ambitious goal, but we've actually raised it before, so I feel pretty confident that we can get there. We're at 55% right now, and so I don't know if you remember this, Deb, but there was one year, maybe like 7 years ago, where we hit our goal before Christmas, and it was the best year of my life.
55% just early. I mean, you just kick the campaign off in September, right?
Yes, and I have to give credit where credit is due. Polaris blew their campaign out of the water. Just incredible. Polaris is our largest campaign in the community, and they are just such a generous group. It helps significantly that Polaris corporate matches dollar for dollar, but even with just the employee gifts, at this point they raise more with like 75 to 80 givers and 150 employees than USD does with 1,100 employees. So I definitely have to give them major credit for where we are right now.
And there's the challenge to USD.
We have a really great USD campaign team this year, I will say. So those of you who work at USD, we've got some energetic young people that are probably going to be shaking you down soon. So they're really excited, so don't ruin their joy. You should probably just participate so that they keep going. So. One of the things that I often talk to you guys about is the poverty rate, and I'll just talk about that really quickly. As you may have seen in the latest census, our poverty rate did go down. It's still quite significant. It's still over 25%, and it's still the highest non-reservation poverty rate in the state. But it has gotten better. I think that you have seen some growth in different sectors of our economy that we didn't see before. But I think it's also, if you actually look away from the percentages and look at the numbers, a big part of it is that we grew. We have more people, which is awesome. And a lot of those folks where we grew are folks outside of that poverty universe. So while our rate got lower, the number of people in poverty didn't really change. So it's that has stayed fairly steady.
Okay, so, some of that is probably attributable to USD students, right?
The poverty rate really isn't. The way that they calculate it, they've been able to, because of the way that student loans are calculated into as income and things like that, and
Well, my question was gonna be like, how do we compare to Brookings, but if it's not part
our poverty rate is so much higher than Brookings. It's not even in the same, or Spearfish, or any of the other college communities. I think the big difference, and this is something that I like about Vermillion, is that our university population or university adjacent population is a larger portion of the community, right? If we have a Venn diagram, ours is more of an overlap. Brookings has a lot more going on that isn't university or isn't university adjacent. Spearfish has a lot of tourism, has a lot of other things going on that aren't either university specific or like serving the university. Vermillion is a bit of a company town, and again, I don't mind that. That I think adds a lot to the community, but it does mean that we don't have as many non-service jobs. We don't have as many things that are not necessarily tied to kind of the whims of the academic year. So I think that's probably a big part of it. So I think the census had a lot of positives in it, in the growth, in the poverty rate going down. I think lots of stuff for us to all be really proud of. That since, we'll always give Steve Howe credit for this, as he's really the one that started raising that flag after the 2010 census. And it was taken very seriously, and, a lot of decisions were made based on that. And I think we can see the results of that. But I just want to caution people from looking at that positive change and saying like, everything's great, we can stop worrying about people being hungry now, because if you were in our building this summer, you would definitely know that the problem is not solved. The number of people that have been getting evicted, in the last couple of months has just been a little bit overwhelming for us, and without a lot of options for what to do. And part of that is, there's just not a lot of open housing. So if somebody gets evicted, it's not just a matter of putting them in another apartment. There isn't another apartment to put them in. And so there's still a lot of challenges. After my last board meeting, they were like, do you want to give us something positive to talk about? And I was like, let's talk about Polaris again. That's always a hard balance of this kind of job, right? I want to be like, everything's awesome, great community, but then I also have to tell you some of the bad things so you understand why it's important. Rich?
I see one of your topics, of course, is affordable housing. What are you doing? Or are you not doing?
So right now we're very much just trying to figure out what part do we play in that, right? We do some direct housing assistance. We, especially during COVID, we did quite a bit of direct housing assistance. We do some through Salvation Army or in partnership with them. But, the size of our organization is such that like we're not going to build affordable housing. Like we don't have those kind of pockets. So what part do we play other than being case managers, which is the main thing that is happening. Again, it's been great to have Josh there, to have like an actual case manager to work on some of these things. But, I think he would tell you so often we come up against these seemingly just unwinnable situations. So, you know, today one of our big conversations at our staff meeting was, how do we get people to the homeless shelter in Yankton, right? Instead of putting them up in hotel rooms, how do we handle transportation? Is that a part that we can play? And so, you know, this is, when I say affordable housing, I'm talking long game, and I'm talking about what is the piece for United Way? And you know, there are a number of different programs around the country that I think are good models that we might be able to pursue, but they would probably take a number of years to put together, and that we don't have the capacity for it quite yet. But it is something that my community impact director, Catherine, she serves on the Vermillion Housing Authority board, and it's something that she's really, really passionate about, and is trying to learn more about the resources that might be available. So, Chuck, and then.
Give us an example of one of these unwinnable situations you talk about.
I can in like very vague terms because of confidentiality, but for example, we had someone who was in an apartment. The apartment was leased under their partner disappeared. They weren't on the lease. They and their children had to be kicked out. We did not have an ability to find another place for them very easily. There was an issue with a criminal record that made them ineligible for a lot of assistance. And so, like, when we think of homelessness in Vermillion, we do probably have more transient homeless than you might be aware of, but that's not usually what it looks like. What it usually looks like is 9 people that are tangentially related living in an apartment. And that's, I think, what ended up with this situation. It was moving in with 2 other families. So, and it just, there was no place for them to go. There was no assistance that they could qualify for. And, you know, we were working with the school social worker, we're talking to housing authority, we're, you know, talking to the apartments that they were in. And those are those situations where we just don't have the resources or the ability to make something happen as fast as it needs to when you're talking about a person and their 2 very young children, you know.
You mentioned that there's a homeless shelter in Yankton brought to mind. Are there some opportunities to work with Yankton on some of these bigger projects? And I think about what this has to do with pets, but when Vermillion was looking at a shelter for pets, we really didn't have the capacity. And so we joined with Yankton and created a regional shelter that has grown and is working pretty well. And I'm just wondering if you have that same, if there's been any thought about working as 2 communities together.
Yeah, and we work very closely with Pathways. Like I said, Catherine, my community impact director, was a caseworker at Pathways, and so she knows them well and knows what they can offer. They've done a recent expansion that's really nice that there's more room. But the difficulty with people compared to pets, people take up a lot more room. They require privacy and security that pets do not. If you put somebody in a different community and they have a job, how do they get to that job? If their children are in school, are you pulling them out of the school that where all of their friends are and where their classrooms are? Just getting them there. You know, Judy's wallet can drive a whole car full of cats over. I don't know if I've got a transient person that walks in off the street, do I want to ask Sue Tuvey to drive them half an hour by herself? And what are the insurance liability, implications of that? So there are just, we want to collaborate. We are collaborating. I mean, we have sent people over there a number of times, but it is not, unfortunately, that 30 miles is a lot, it's a lot more difficult a distance when you're talking about humans, and especially families. A single homeless transient person that's going across the country is one thing, but families and kids, that just makes things a lot more difficult. And then if they've got a pet, that makes it really difficult.
No, those are issues that I think, thank you for explaining that, because a lot of people think, well, it should just be so easy, but you just answered that question.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I appreciate it. Well, I really appreciate everyone's time today. I know that for some of you, you've probably been hearing, this is actually my 10th year with United Way, which means this might be the 10th, or depending on what other things you're involved in, more times that you've heard somewhat this pitch. But I will say that, this organization has been in the community since 1956, and I think if you look historically at the impact it's made and the folks that have been involved over the years and what we've been able to do by pooling our resources together, it's been really phenomenal, and we as a community have a lot to be proud of. If you haven't been down to the CCC lately, please stop in sometime, and I would love to show you around and talk to you about some of the opportunities for supporting and for being involved. So, thank you. Let's see. Okay.
Staying. Yes, Don.
I know a lot of you are wondering who won the Monday Night Football game this week. Did anybody in the room win? Emily American won 2 weeks in a row now. I don't know. Lucky she ought to go out and buy a lottery ticket. So Emily American winner.
Thank you. I've added you to my list there and staying true to form as I always have. Thank you, guest. I forget names instantly. Josh. Thank you very much. A couple of times Kelsey saved me there too. That's appreciated. Okay.